Hey, tonight, we're going to the Pacific Northwest of America, to a time of rain and gray skies, of dense forests that drink the clouds and keep their secrets. Imagine a chilly Wednesday afternoon in Portland, Oregon. The year is 1971. The world feels simpler then. Men wear suits to fly on airplanes, and you can still smoke in your seat. The air smells of wet tarmac and jet fuel. It's the day before a holiday, a day of travel, of people going home. A day like any other, but somewhere in that airport, a man is walking toward a counter. He moves with a quiet purpose. A man who has made a decision so complete that it has settled deep in his bones, leaving no room for doubt. He's not a gangster. He's not a killer. He looks like an accountant, a mid-level manager, someone you would pass on the street and forget instantly. And that is his greatest weapon. He is about to board a flight and step not just out of a plane, but out of reality itself, becoming a ghost in the American story. So before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let the world outside this story fade away. Dim your screen. Let your body grow heavy, and allow the rhythm of my voice to be your guide. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from tonight. Now, let's take a deep breath together and fly into the heart of this enduring mystery. The air inside the Portland International Airport terminal hangs thick with the scent of damp wool coats and stale coffee. Outside, a persistent needle-fine rain paints the windows in shifting patterns of grey. It is November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, and the terminal hums with the low, steady energy of travel. Families herd, children, businessmen flip through newspapers, and a quiet man in a black suit walks toward the Northwest Orient Airlines counter. He moves with an economy of motion, not hurried, not slow. He is a man who seems to have perfectly calibrated himself to the world around him, drawing no attention, leaving no wake. He is around 45 years old, of medium height and build. He wears a simple black business suit, a crisp white-collared shirt, and a narrow black tie, held in place with a mother roof pearl tie clip. He carries a dark overcoat and a black attached case, the kind 1,000 other men carry to 1,000 other meetings. He looks like he belongs. When he reaches the counter, he asks for a one-way ticket on Flight 305 to Seattle, Washington. A short flight, barely 30 minutes in the air. The ticket agent, a woman whose face is tired from a long shift, barely looks up. He pays with cash, $20 bills that feel cool and anonymous in his hand. The name he gives is Dan Cooper. He takes his ticket and walks to the gate. He does not pace. He does not check his watch. He simply sits and waits. He watches the other passengers, a mother trying to quiet a restless child, 2 college students laughing over a shared book, an elderly couple holding hands, their silence more comfortable than any conversation. Cooper observes them all with a detached curiosity, like a scientist studying a species he will never join. There is no flicker of nervousness in his eyes, no tremble in his hand as he reaches into his pocket for a cigarette. He is a man existing in a profound, unshakable calm. It's a quiet so deep, it's almost a presence in itself. A bubble of stillness in the gentle chaos of the airport. When the call to board comes, he stands, puts out his cigarette, and joins the line. He walks down the jet bridge, the scent of the rain outside now mixed with the hum of the plane's ventilation. He finds his seat, 18C, in the rear of the Boeing 727. The plane is only about 1/3 full, plenty of empty seats. He settles in, placing his attached case neatly on the seat beside him, not under his feet. A small detail, but a deliberate one. The flight attendant, a young woman named Florence Schaffner, comes by. He orders a drink, bourbon and soda. He pays with a $20 bill and tells her to keep the change. His voice is low, polite, unremarkable. He is just another passenger, another face in the crowd. The plane taxis away from the gate, its windshield wipers pushing aside the relentless drizzle. It turns onto the runway, the engines whining as they build to a roar. Then, a lurch, a rush of motion, and the plane lifts into the bruised purple sky. Below, the lights of Portland shrank, becoming a glittering map before being swallowed by the thick blanket of clouds. The plane climbs, finding a smoother altitude. The seatbelt sign dings off. The cabin settles into the gentle drone of the journey. Don Cooper lights another cigarette, the smoke curling around his face before being pulled away by the air vents. He looks out the window at the endless grey, a man suspended between two worlds, about to create a third one all his own. He is not thinking about what is to come. He is simply, in the moment, a study in absolute presence. He is a man who has made peace with his plan, and now he is simply letting it unfold, one quiet second at a time. The flight is short, a quick hop up the coast. The time in the air is measured in minutes, not hours. The flight attendants begin their service, moving down the aisle with practiced efficiency. Everything is routine. The hum of the engines is a constant, soothing drone. The passengers are lost in their own worlds, reading, dozing, staring out at the sea of clouds. It is in this bubble of absolute normalcy that Dan Cooper decides to act. He doesn't move suddenly. He doesn't raise his voice. His movements are as calm and deliberate as they have been all day. He catches the eye of Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant who had served him his drink. She is on her way back to the galley. He holds up a hand, a gentle gesture, and when she approaches, he passes her a folded piece of white paper. It looks like a business card, or perhaps a note with a phone number, a common enough occurrence for flight attendants in that era. She assumes it is just that, a flirtatious move from a lonely businessman. She smiles politely and, without reading it, slips the note into her purse pocket. His face remains impassive, but he leans slightly toward her, his voice low enough that only she can hear. "Miss," he says, the word polite, almost soft. "You'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The words are so out of place, so contrary to his calm demeanor, that for a split second they don't register. They are a glitch in reality, but his eyes hold hers, and there is a weight in them, a seriousness that cuts through her professional composure. She feels a cold knot form in her stomach, but her training takes over. She walks away from him, toward the rear of the plane, and pulls the note from her pocket. The handwriting is neat, all capital letters, written with what looks like a felt-tip pen. The message is simple and terrifyingly clear. It says he has a bomb in his briefcase, and that he wants her to sit with him. She takes a deep, silent breath, her mind racing. This can't be real. The man is so calm, so ordinary, but the note feels real. The look in his eyes felt real. She walks back down the aisle, her steps measured, her face a mask of professional calm. The other passengers notice nothing. She sits in the empty seat beside him, as instructed. Her heart is a frantic drum against her ribs. "You're joking, right?" she asks, her voice a little shaky. He doesn't smile. He doesn't frown. He simply looks at her and says, quietly, "No, miss, I'm not." She asks to see the bomb. He doesn't make a show of it. He unlatches his black attach case and opens it just enough for her to see inside. It is not the chaotic mess of wires she might have imagined. It is neat, organized. She sees 2 rows of 4 red cylinders connected by red wires to what looks like a large cylindrical battery. It looks professional. It looks deadly. Whether it's real or not is irrelevant. In that moment, for her and for everyone on that plane, it is the most real thing in the world. He closes the case. "Now," he says, his voice still a low, even murmur, "I have some demands." He tells her he wants $200,000 in negotiable American currency. He specifies that he wants it in a knapsack. He then adds another request, one that chills her even more than the money. He wants 4 parachutes, 2 primary main parachutes, and 2 reserve parachutes. He is precise. He tells her to write this down, to take the note to the captain, and to inform him that they are not to land until his demands are met. He is not angry. He is not threatening. He is giving instructions, as if he were a manager outlining a new company policy. She nods, stands up on legs that feel like they might not hold her, and walks the long walk to the cockpit. A messenger between the quiet, ordinary world and the calm, terrifying man in seat 18C. The door to the cockpit of Flight 305 was a sacred boundary, a line between the passengers and the complex machinery of flight. When Florence Schaffner knocked and entered, her face pale but composed, the flight crew knew immediately that this was not a routine interruption. She handed the captain, William Scott, the note she had written, her own handwriting shaky compared to the hijacker's neat print. Captain Scott read the demands, his eyes scanning the words. $200,000 for parachutes. A bomb. He exchanged a look with his co-pilot. Decades of flight experience had prepared them for engine failures, for turbulence, for storms. But not for this. Not for a man so quiet you could forget he was there, holding the lives of everyone. On board, in a black briefcase, Captain Scott immediately radioed Seattle-Tacoma Air Traffic Control, relaying the situation with professional calm. The message traveled up the chain of command with lightning speed to the airline, to local police, to the FBI. On the ground, a quiet chaos began. The president of Northwest Orient Airlines, Donald Noir, made a swift decision. The safety of the passengers and crew was the only priority. They would cooperate fully, give the man exactly what he wanted. The plane, which had been on its final approach to Seattle, was instructed to enter a holding pattern. It began to circle lazily over Puget Sound, the body of water that separates Seattle from the rugged Olympic Peninsula. To the 36 passengers on board, nothing seemed amiss. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and reassuring, explaining that they would be delayed due to a minor mechanical difficulty that required them to burn off some fuel before landing. It was a common enough excuse. No one panicked. No one suspected the quiet, slow-motion drama unfolding in the rear of the cabin. For nearly 2 hours, the Boeing 727 traced wide, graceful circles in the sky, a silver bird held captive by an invisible thread. Down below, the FBI was scrambling. Agents rushed to gather the ransom money, collecting $10,000 $20 bills. Every single bill was photographed, its serial number recorded, creating a trail they hoped would lead them back to this ghost. The task was enormous and time-consuming. Meanwhile, other authorities were tasked with procuring the 4 parachutes. They contacted McCord Air Force Base nearby, but Cooper had been specific. He wanted civilian parachutes, not military ones. So, the request was rerouted to a local, skydiving school. An employee there hastily gathered 2 primary parachutes and 2 reserve chutes. One of the reserve parachutes, unknown to anyone at the time, was a training model that had been sewn shut for demonstration purposes. It was useless. Aboard the plane, Dan Cooper remained a pillar of unnatural calm. He was an island of tranquility in a sea of unspoken tension. He ordered a second bourbon and soda, and when the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, who had taken over sitting with him, brought it, he insisted on paying. He even offered to request meals for the flight crew for when they landed, a gesture of consideration so bizarre under the circumstances that it left her speechless. He was polite, almost gentle. He chatted with Tina, asking her where she was from, commenting on how beautiful the city lights looked from above. He pointed out Tacoma through a break in the clouds, showing a familiarity with the local geography that investigators would later pore over. He was not behaving like a desperate criminal. He was behaving like a man in complete and total control, not just of the situation, but of himself. The waiting did not seem to bother him. It seemed to be part of his plan. At approximately 5:39 p.m., after 2 long hours of circling, the word came from the ground. The money and the parachutes were ready. Dan Cooper, ever the calm director of this strange play, gave his permission for the plane to land. Flight 300 descended through the rain and darkness, its landing lights cutting through the gloom, and touched down smoothly at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. But Cooper had one more instruction. He did not want to taxi to the brightly lit main terminal. He directed the pilot to a remote, isolated section of the tarmac, an apron far from the prying eyes of the terminal buildings and, more importantly, far from any potential police snipers. Once the plane came to a stop, the engines idling with a low rumble, Cooper ordered the cabin lights to be dimmed. He instructed Tina, the flight attendant, to have all the window shades pulled down, plunging the cabin into a deep, artificial twilight. He was sealing them off from the outside world, creating his own small, self-contained universe. The exchange was to be handled with the same quiet precision that had marked his every action. A single airline employee, clad in rain gear, walked out of the darkness of the airfield. He carried a heavy knapsack filled with the $200,000 in cash and the bundle of 4 parachutes. He approached the rear of the plane, where the aft stairs, a unique feature of the Boeing 727, had been lowered. Tina Mucklow met the employee at the base of the stairs, the cold rain soaking her uniform. The money and parachutes were handed over. The exchange was made without a word. The employee retreated back into the rainy night, his part in the drama over. Now Cooper had everything he had asked for. The money was on board. The parachutes were on board. And then he did something that solidified his legend as a hijacker unlike any other. He upheld his end of the bargain. He told Captain Scott that all 36 passengers were free to go. He also released Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant to whom he had first passed the note. The cabin door was opened, and the passengers, still oblivious to the true nature of the mechanical issue, they walked down the stairs onto the wet tarmac and toward a bus that would take them to the terminal. Their minds on missed connections and holiday dinners, not on the fact that they had just been hostages. They were safe, and they didn't even know they had been in danger. Cooper's calm, non-violent approach had prevented any panic. Now, the plane sat in the darkness, a hollowed-out vessel. Only 5 people remained: Cooper, Captain Scott, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and Tina. Mucklow. Cooper was not done. He had a new plan, a second act. He instructed the ground crew to refuel the aircraft. As the fuel truck pumped thousands of gallons of jet fuel into the wings, Cooper outlined his next set of instructions to the pilots. He wanted to fly to Mexico City, but he wanted to do it his way. The flight plan he dictated was bizarre, and it told the crew in the cockpit one thing loud and clear. This man knew aeroplanes. He was no amateur. The strange, quiet journey of Flight 305 was about to enter its final, most mysterious chapter. As the plane was being refueled on the dark, rain-swept tarmac, Dan Cooper laid out the precise conditions for the second leg of his flight. He spoke to Tina, who relayed his instructions to the cockpit. The specificity of his demands sent a chill through the experienced flight crew. This was not a man making wild guesses. He understood the aerodynamic capabilities and limitations of the Boeing 727. He instructed them to fly south towards Mexico City, but to keep the plane at an altitude below 10,000 feet. A normal flight would cruise at over 30,000 feet. This low altitude would ensure the cabin remained breathable even if unpressurized. Next, he demanded that the wing flaps be lowered to a 15-degree angle. This, combined with his third instruction to keep the landing gear downward force the aircraft to fly at a very slow speed, just above its stall speed, approximately 200 miles per hour. It was a strange, inefficient way to fly, burning fuel at an incredible rate. But it was the perfect speed for what he was planning. It was the speed of a man preparing to exit a moving vehicle. His final, most critical instruction was that the rear-aft stairway must be left down and unlocked during the flight. The pilots, sitting in the secure cockpit, pushed back on this last point. It was unsafe, they argued. The plane could not take off with the stairs deployed. Cooper, ever the reasonable negotiator, listened. He was not a pilot, but he was intelligent. He conceded the point, agreeing that the stairs could be raised for takeoff, but he made it clear he wanted to know how to lower them himself once they were airborne. He was alone now with the small crew, a silent king in an empty metal kingdom. He told Tina Mucklow to go into the cockpit with the rest of the crew and to close the door behind her. She was the last person to see him. Before she left, in a final gesture of his strange, detached politeness, he tried to give her a stack of the ransom money. She refused. He did not insist. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 taxied back onto the runway. It took off from Seattle, climbing sluggishly into the stormy night sky. The weather had worsened. Heavy clouds blotted out the stars, and fierce winds buffeted the aircraft. Below, there was only darkness, the vast unlit wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, a sprawling expanse of dense forest, rugged peaks, and churning rivers. Inside the passenger cabin, Don Cooper was completely alone. Imagine him there, in the dim, empty cabin, the low hum of the engines, the sound of the wind screaming past the fuselage, the 30-some rows of empty seats stretching out before him like a silent audience. He had his knapsack of money, his parachutes, and his thoughts. What was he doing? Was he preparing himself, tying the heavy bag of cash to his body? Was he carefully inspecting the parachute rig, a piece of equipment that would either be his salvation or his coffin? Did he feel fear, or was he still wrapped in that same profound calm, a man so committed to his path that emotion was simply irrelevant? We can only picture him moving deliberately in the swaying cabin, a solitary figure acting out the final scene of his own design. At 8 p.m., a light flashed on the instrument panel in the cockpit. It indicated that the aft staircase was being activated. The pilots felt a change in air pressure. Cooper was opening the back of the plane. The captain's voice came over the intercom, asking if he needed assistance. A calm, simple voice replied, "No." It was the last word anyone would ever hear from Don Cooper. At 13 minutes past 8 o'clock in the evening, as Flight 305 lumbered through the stormy skies somewhere between Seattle and Reno, the crew in the cockpit felt a sudden, subtle change in the aircraft's balance. The tail of the Boeing 727 momentarily oscillated, a slight upward bounce, as if a heavy weight had just been removed from its rearmost point. There was no sound, no alarm, just a small, almost imperceptible shift in the physics of the flight. In that silent, unseen moment, Dan Cooper ceased to be a passenger. He became a ghost. He had stepped off the lowered aft stairs and into the heart of a freezing wind-whipped storm, plunging into the pitch-black wilderness of southwestern Washington. He fell from the sky wearing a business suit and loafers, with a 20-pound bag of money strapped to his body, trusting his life to a parachute he had never seen before, into a terrain so rugged and unforgiving that even experienced survivalists would find it daunting in broad daylight. The temperature at that altitude was well below freezing, and the wind chill from his descent would have been brutal. He was a man falling into a black, roaring void. Did he see the tops of the massive Douglas fir trees rushing up to meet him? Or was there only the suffocating darkness, the scream of the wind, and the frantic hope that he had chosen his landing zone well? The pilots in the cockpit, unaware of the exact moment of his departure, continued to fly the plane according to his last instructions. They maintained the slow speed, the low altitude. For all they knew, the quiet hijacker was still in the back, waiting. They flew on for nearly 2 more hours, the empty cabin behind them a silent testament to the strange events of the day. The plane, burning fuel so quickly, could not make it to Mexico City. They landed to refuel in Reno, Nevada, just before midnight. When the plane touched down, it was immediately surrounded by a swarm of FBI agents and police officers, their cars, flashing lights painting the wet tarmac in strobing blues and reds. They stormed the aircraft, weapons drawn, expecting a confrontation. But they found only an empty, silent cabin. Don Cooper was gone. He had vanished into the night, as if he were never there at all. All that remained of him were the things he had chosen to leave behind. 2 of the 4 parachutes lay on a seat. His black clip-on tie was on the floor, along with 8 filter-tipped Rolly cigarette butts in the ashtray. The man himself, the knapsack of money, and one of the parachutes had been swallowed by the storm. The investigation that followed would become one of the most famous and frustrating in the annals of American crime, codenamed NORJRK for Northwest. Hijacking, it began with a single, overwhelming question. Where did he land? The FBI, working with the pilots, attempted to triangulate a probable jump zone based on the flight path, the wind speed, and the moment the tail of the plane had moved. Their best estimate pointed to a vast, rugged area of wilderness near Mount St. Helens in Washington. The search began almost immediately, a massive undertaking against impossible odds. Hundreds of soldiers from the nearby Fort Lewis Army Base were deployed, joining police officers and local volunteers. They combed the dense, mountainous forest on foot. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their crews scanning the endless canopy of trees. But the wilderness did not give up its secrets easily. The terrain was brutal, a tangled mess of deep woods, steep ravines, and fast-flowing rivers. The weather remained terrible, with snow in the higher elevations hampering the search. For weeks, They looked. They found nothing. No body, no briefcase, no parachute hanging from a tree, not a single $20 bill. It was as if Dan Cooper had simply evaporated the moment he left the plane. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is not an agency that gives up easily. For years after the jump, the Noir case remained a top priority. Agents pursued thousands of leads, interviewing anyone who might have had a connection, no matter how tenuous. They created a composite sketch of the hijacker based on the descriptions from the flight crew: a calm, unremarkable man in his mid-40s, with dark hair and brown eyes. The sketch was plastered in post offices and newspapers across the country. Tips flooded in. People claimed to have seen him, to know him, to be him. Every lead was meticulously followed. Every suspect was investigated. And every path led to a dead end. The few physical clues he left behind were analyzed with the best technology of the time. The 8 cigarette butts he smoked were tested, but DNA profiling was still years away. The fingerprints lifted from his seating area and his bourbon glass were run through every database the FBI had, with no matches. The name he gave, Dan Cooper, was believed to be an alias. A reporter, in the early chaotic days of the investigation, misheard a lead and printed the name D.B. Cooper, and that was the name that stuck in the public imagination, adding another layer of myth to the faceless man. The black clip-on tie he left on his seat became an object of intense scrutiny. Decades later, as technology advanced, forensic scientists were able to isolate particles from the tie. They found trace amounts of rare earth elements like cerium and strontium sulfide, materials that were used at the time in very specific high-tech manufacturing, possibly by a company like Boeing, which had plants in the Seattle area. It was a tantalizing clue. Did he work for an aerospace company? Was he an engineer, a manager? It suggested a man with a technical background, which aligned with his knowledge of the aircraft. But it was not enough to identify him. The clue, like all the others, led down a fascinating path that ultimately went nowhere. Years turned into a decade. The active investigation slowed, but the legend of D.B. Cooper only grew. He became a folk hero to some, a symbol of rebellion against the system. A man who, with quiet audacity, had pulled off the perfect crime and simply walked away. Songs were written about him, books were published, theories abounded. Did he survive the jump? Many experts said it was impossible. An inexperienced skydiver, jumping into a freezing storm at night, over treacherous terrain, wearing only a business suit. His chances were close to zero. They believed his body lay somewhere in the vast Washington wilderness, lost forever. But others believed he was far too smart to fail. He had planned everything else with such calm precision. Perhaps he was an ex-paratrooper with experience in rough terrain jumps. Maybe he had an accomplice on the ground waiting for him with a car and a change of clothes. The mystery was a perfect blank canvas onto which anyone could project their own theory. Then, in February of 1980, nearly 9 years after the hijacking, the case took a stunning turn. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on a family picnic, digging in the sandy banks of the Columbia River, miles downstream from the suspected jump zone. His fingers brushed against something buried in the sand. He pulled out 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills. They were waterlogged and falling apart, but they were undeniably money. The FBI was called, and they confirmed the serial numbers. It was Cooper's money. He had found $5,800 of the ransom. The discovery reignited the case, but it only deepened the mystery. How did the money get there? Did Cooper land in the river and drown, the money washing ashore years later? Or did he bury it there, intending to come back, but never could? The money was the last concrete piece of evidence ever found. The rest of the $194,200 has never been seen again. And so, the story of Dan Cooper ends not with a resolution, but with a quiet, fading echo. A mystery that has drifted through time for over half a century, as persistent and gentle as the Pacific Northwest rain. What became of the man in the business suit? Did he find his landing in the dark, gather his money, and melt back into the world, living out his days in quiet anonymity, a secret smile playing on his lips whenever his own legend was mentioned? Or did the forest claim him? His final moments a desperate struggle against the cold and the unforgiving wilderness. His bones now part of the earth, his story known only to the silent, ancient trees. We will likely never know. In 2016, after 45 years of chasing a ghost, the FBI officially closed its active investigation. The case of D.B. Cooper remains the only unsolved air piracy in American history. It is a story with no final chapter, a puzzle with missing pieces that were perhaps never meant to be found. He is a question mark hanging in the sky, a modern folktale that reminds us that sometimes people can simply vanish. They can step out of a door and into a legend, leaving behind nothing but the story itself. And perhaps that is the most peaceful ending of all. No dramatic capture, no final confrontation, just a quiet disappearance, a clean escape into the mists of time. So now, let the story of the man in the sky drift away. Let the image of the dark forest and the falling rain gently recede from your mind. There is nothing left for you to figure out, nothing left to solve. The story was just a soft place for your mind to rest, a gentle current to carry you toward. Sleep, feel the weight of your body, comfortable and still. Notice the slow, easy rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. Let go of the day, let go of the story. There is only this moment, this quiet, peaceful darkness. The mystery is over. Your only task now is to rest, sleep now. Let the gentle current of your breath carry you into a deep and restful sleep. The night is quiet, the sky is clear, and you are safe. Good night.